Hey guys, this is part one of a two-part discussion on intimacy within marriage and what we've seen create a perfect storm for intimacy issues in marriage. So, we're touching on people from your past and influences that end up making it into your marriage bed with you, not literally, of course, but figuratively. And because of this, there's major barriers to intimacy and connection as a couple that sometimes stay unresolved through the marriage. So let's get into it.
Welcome to Disrupt the Pattern.
We're Nathan and Sarah Coffin, and our mission is to revive marriages and families to create a new wave of authentic, Christ-driven homes.
So, intimacy issues are common in marriages, even though most people wouldn't admit it or want to talk about it with anybody. It's obviously a very personal thing, and seeking advice can be a nightmare, if not even worse, for you if it's not the right person. There's a lot of pieces to the puzzle that can be causing these issues, and it's different for everyone. But we're going to go over a few areas that we've seen as factors. In part one, we're discussing influences people have that shape their view of intimacy, more specifically from church culture and pop culture.
Okay, so we try bringing a biblical perspective to our episodes, but we're also not afraid of bringing to light the fact that sometimes Christian culture has damaging influence when they have swung too far in one direction. So when it comes to intimacy, Christian culture has struggled with the balance of embracing and celebrating sex for what it is, which is a beautiful thing that God created for our enjoyment and a beautiful way of expressing love and connection and furthering his creation, of course. But the other end of it is they chastise it and they avoid the subject and shame it because of how mutilated and perverted and abused sex has become in our culture.
How many sermons have you heard on intimacy and marriage or God's design for sex? We're guessing not too many. Although it does happen, it should be talked about more. In a world that's obsessed with sex and throws distorted views of it in your face all day long, Christian culture should be openly talking about it and be the first influence for young people instead of letting them learn it everywhere else in their life. Religious influences that could have shaped your view of intimacy could be sermons, pastors, Sunday school teachers, or your family. While their motives were good or are good in wanting to create wholesome individuals and prevent sin in their lives and struggles from what sexual sin can bring to a person in marriage, some people take it to the next level and make it seem like sex is evil and not something to enjoy, only to be fruitful and multiply to make babies, and that's it.
Baby making. So, seriously though, when you've been influenced like that, it really messes with what intimacy is going to look like in a marriage, which is avoided, unfeeling, unfulfilling, shameful, or frustrating, but definitely also hurtful to the spouse who didn't have those same influences and can't understand why their husband or wife doesn't desire them in that way. So, when these influences and teachings have been pounded into your brain growing up, it's difficult to navigate that in a marriage without having those thoughts and voices in your head and in your bed that are shaming you when you're trying to be intimate together.
So let's talk about world culture a little bit. Porn, movies, and TV in general, books and women with their romance novels, and what social media and the whole world is obsessed with. We're flooded with it from an earlier and earlier age. And all of these have shaped our ideas about what sex should look like in and outside of marriage. And unfortunately, heavily on the outside of marriage, since that's when it seems like most of it is going on in today's culture. But everything has been twisted and over sexualized and desecrated in so many ways that we start bringing that into our heads and into our homes, and it has no place in that form for healthy marriage. It desensitizes us to what's in front of us and gets us to live in a fantasy world that books and movies have shown us that it should be like. And so it produces disappointment and frustration because, well, that's not what it looked like in the movies.
Or that's what it looked like in the movies. Like, that's what it should be, right? If you think about some of the things that have become not necessarily accepted, but yet
prevalent.
Yeah. Clearly, we can all agree that it's become like so sexualized in all of our culture. And that influence that we have in our face every day is a sad one and generally leads to skewed expectations, disappointment, resentment within your marriage, and just a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm. Hebrews 13:4 says, "Let marriage be held in honor among all, and let the marriage bed be undefiled. For God will judge the sexually immoral and adulterous." We also needed to read this other version too, just because it's funny. "Marriage is honorable in all, and the bed undefiled. But whoremongers and adulterers God will judge."
Thank you, King James Version. Whoremongers.
1 Corinthians 7:3-4 says, "The husband should fulfill his marital duty to his wife, and likewise the wife to her husband. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but yields it to her husband. And in the same way, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but yields it to his wife. Mutual desire and needs, mutual parts and fulfilling them."
Right, because there is different views of that too. It's like the gender, like guys are the ones that are more sex driven and women aren't, and the thought that if women are, it's kind of like a shameful thing, or it's just like it's not normal and there's something wrong, and that causes a lot of problems too. But ultimately, the point is that Christians can have great sex. And if that sounds like an oxymoron to you, you may need to examine what's influencing your thoughts about it. And you may need to open up your Bible to the book of Song of Solomon and read that, because that'll make anyone blush. That's some interesting stuff there. But also, there's a book called Sheet Music, and it's another source for kind of like rewiring your brain to think of intimacy in a healthier view within marriage and Christian marriage. So we'll share a little bit here. So it's probably not super common anymore for religions to be very, very strict on like the gender roles, and the wife, like her duty is to fulfill the man's need no matter what, and things like that. Or even talking about like sex being a bad thing, but it was a practice. Like, you grew up kind of with that influence. I didn't grow up with a strong influence that way, but we definitely didn't talk about it. Like, don't talk about it at all because it's kind of a shameful thing. But all in all, like, the Christian view has had an influence in our marriage. And it was kind of an interesting, maybe not interesting, but a difficult time when you think about coming into a marriage. You're newlyweds already. We dated from a distance too, and so it was just like shock and intimacy. And I think we said it last episode, like, great intimacy doesn't just happen. Like, it's a practice, but it's not that you are to practice to get better for marriage, because that's also a thought, right? But we really do feel like there is a huge barrier within religious factors and just kind of the shying away that churches and religion can have, but also just all the nasty stuff from the world.
Right. And I mean, understandably, the church has trouble dealing with it because the world is crazy with it. And so the church kind of is still reeling, I think, over how do we deal with this? What do we say? What do we not say? So then they just choose not to do anything, which is not the good answer either. So,
Right. And I mean, from a younger and younger age, like you said, we're influenced. We were talking, we're like, well, the church can have a role in talking about it, but they really can't do that when kids are as young as they are when they start talking about this stuff. Like,
right.
if you ride a bus, if you ride a bus to public school, you're going to be like kindergarten, first grade, when you're hearing things and learning stuff that you shouldn't even be thinking about, shouldn't even be knowing about. And I actually had a conversation with my sons today on the way to piano. We were talking about public school, and we talked about the bus, and I was just like, yeah. So there's just a lot of things that your little mind should have no clue what that is or what's going on at that age at all. So, there's a lot more to go into it. And there's a lot that we're going into next week about our past experiences, our past influences, either, growing up or dating other people that are going to be causing some barriers in intimacy as well. So part 2 is next week. So definitely join in next week for that talk, and we're going to go deeper into that. So till next time, stay authentic
and disrupt those patterns.